Welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. Here's your host, Tom Bourne.
Hi, and welcome to Health and Safety Conversations. I'm your host, Tom Bourne, and with me today are the stellar speakers, James Wood and Michael Weston. Gentlemen, how are you?
Great, thank you.
Tom.
Great, Tom.
Excellent. So, James, you're in Melbourne at the moment. Where are you, Michael?
I'm in Perth, Western Australia.
Fantastic, mate. The centre of the universe as we know it.
30 degrees yesterday.
I know. I went outside. I was lounging around like a lizard. I couldn't believe it. It was awesome. All right, gentlemen.
It's 8 degrees and raining here. So
That's what you get for being in the cultural capital of Australia, apparently.
Yes.
All right. Now, I know a bit about you, and so do quite a few other people. But for those who don't, can you tell us a little bit about your own stories? Obviously, one at a time, because that would be awkward if you started talking together. And just tell us about your working life and what's happened to you.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll kick it off if you don't mind, Michael. I come from a mining family. My old man was in mining his whole life. My grandfather worked in the coal mines in Scotland. I left school early and got into the industry as a diesel mechanic. Had got an apprenticeship at a little underground coal mine up in Gunnedah, New South Wales. Finished my apprenticeship. Life was pretty cruisy. Working in mining. One day I went to work. We're a bit short-staffed this day, and I was given a few jobs that I had to do. The first job was a truck had broken down on the site. The power steering belt had snapped on one of the trucks that we were using. So the boss said, look, would he go out and fix this truck? But then he said to me, look, after you fix it, take it up to the parking bay so the operator can pick it up. Now, the thing about that, Tom, is I could actually see where I had to go. So I only had to move the truck a short distance. So I jumped up into the cabin, had a look at the time. I noticed it was 5 to 9 in the morning. Smoko was at 9 o'clock. So I thought, oh, beauty, if I can get back to the crib room by 9 o'clock, I can catch up with my mates. I took off down the road in a bit of a hurry, put my foot down, going a little bit too quick for the conditions. I lost control of the vehicle, ended up rolling it down the side of a hill on the site. I got thrown out of the cabin and I broke my back. Damaged my spinal cord. Now, the reason that I believe I got thrown out of the truck that day is that I wasn't held in. The truck had seat belts and I didn't have a seatbelt on. So basically, the choices that I made caused me to end up in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So yeah, that's pretty much my little story, and just a little bit of how I came to be where I am today, Tom. Probably about 4 or 5 years after I got hurt, one of the boys that I used to work with, he made it up into a leadership role. He made it up to a supervisor's role, and he rang me up and he said, "Oh, Woody," he said, "we're having this safety bullshit day." That was his exact words. He said, "Woody, we're having this safety bullshit day. I reckon you should come out and tell people what happened to you." And initially I told him to get stuffed. I said, "There's no way I'm going to sit in front of a group of people and talk about my accident." But he kept nagging me. And one day he actually asked me, he said, "Look, if someone had turned up at our site and shared their story, is that the sort of thing that you would have listened to?" And something just clicked. I thought, yeah, I would have liked to have heard it not from my managers or not from my safety people, but from someone that I could relate to.
Yep.
So I went out and had a bit of a yarn at his safety day, and it just sort of took off from there.
Oh, excellent. Good.
So that's my little story.
Beautiful.
Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, it's every time you tell that when you're in the vehicle and it's rolling over, it gives me chills. So
yeah.
I don't know what it's like for you, mate. Yeah, a little bit about my story. I worked in mining for approximately 20 years in Western Australia, throughout both goldfields and the Pilbara region in WA. I was my last role I was a superintendent for maintenance shuts.
Mhm.
Really stressful and demanding role. If you didn't allow yourself time to, take time out for relaxation and that. So it really took a demand on me, I suppose a toll on me. So yeah, for me, I woke up one morning like I would for the past 20 years, and I don't remember much of this. My wife tells me all about this story. And I was walking out the door one morning after kissing her goodbye at about 5 a.m. And I was found by my neighbour lying face down on my driveway, as he said, unresponsive, white to look at and cold to touch. Went through the CPR process, got me breathing again. An ambulance was called. I ended up in the Karratha Hospital, wondering where I was, how I got there. And the biggest thing for me was I was going to be in all sorts of dramas when I get back to work. So I really wasn't present around where I should have been, was looking after myself. But unfortunately, I went through, I suppose, after being released from hospital, I got 3 weeks off work, and I didn't actually get diagnosed to have an acquired brain injury until 12 months later. So that's my story, and mental health jumped on board after that, which I'm happy to share later as well.
Yeah. All right. James, just going back to you for a second. I know this sounds strange, and I hope I don't offend you in any way, but do you feel lucky? Because you're 50% more likely to die in a motor vehicle incident if you're not wearing a seatbelt. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah, look, it's funny, Tom. I hate the fact that I'm in a wheelchair. I get angry, I get frustrated, I get sad. I get all the different emotions because of the fact that I can't walk. I can't even stand up. If I were to sort of lift myself up on a couple of, rails, as soon as I let go, I just fall flat on my backside. So, you can imagine I do get, quite upset by it. But having said that, I've had 30 years of life that I might have missed out on.
Yeah.
So, I do, I am sort of realistic that I'm still here, and I've probably done some things that I might not have done if I could have been killed that day.
Yeah.
My mum summed it up just recently. Here's a little story. I was up at mum's at Christmas time, and I told her I had to go to this shop to pick up some parts for one of my old cars. Anyhow, when I got there was a couple of steps out the front. And I said to my mum, oh, Mum, you reckon by now they'd have a ramp, they'd have a ramp to let me get in. And my mum just looked at me. Mum's in her 80s. Mum just said, get over it. And I'm going, what? She says, you've had 30 years that you could have missed out on. And I'm going, oh, okay, Mum, settle down. She also said to me, Tom, she says, oh, and you've saved me a hell of a lot of money. And I said, well, how does that work, Mum? She says, well, do you know how expensive flowers are these days? She said, I could be coming putting bunches of flowers on a big mound of dirt. And I've gone, all right. So yeah, Mum put it all back into perspective for me. As much as I don't like the situation that I'm in, but there's nothing I can do about it, and I've just got to make the most of it.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few gentlemen, and what people I have spoken to are gentlemen. So I won't go into gender neutral stuff because they were gentlemen who have had spinal cord injuries and found themselves in wheelchairs. And most of them tell me that shortly afterwards, and for maybe a period of time afterwards, they were extremely angry people. Did that happen to you?
Not immediately. I think really early on, I've got to give my old man some credit, Tom, because I went down the blame path in that I was trying to blame somebody else for what happened to me.
Yep.
And I find that a lot. I find that whenever something bad happens to us, most people, the first thing they try and do is blame somebody else for it. And I think what that does is if you can blame somebody else, then you automatically feel better about what's happened to you. And that's what I was trying to do, in hospital and going through the rehab process. I was saying to myself, well, my managers and my supervisors, they didn't train me well enough. They didn't supervise me all the time to make sure I was making the right choices. But then I got pretty desperate, and I actually started to blame my workmates, the boys and the girls that I worked with every day, because I'm thinking, well, no one ever said anything to me. Not once did someone see me climb into a truck or a light vehicle and say, hey, Woody, put your seatbelt on. So, I was going down that blame path. And anyhow, one day when I was in hospital, my dad was sitting aside of my hospital bed, and I turned to my old man, and he's reading his newspaper, and I'm just going, oh, well, Dad, they should have done this or they should have done that. And my old man looked at me and he said, look, wake up to yourself. I'm going, what? He says, answer this for me. He said, who got into the truck that day? I said, yeah, I did. He said, who took off down the road too fast? I'm going, yeah, what's your point, Dad? And he said to me, he said, well, you made some wrong choices. He said, you're never going to achieve anything by blaming somebody else. He said, what you've got to do is accept the fact that you stuffed up and get on with it.
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you, I hated him at the time. I thought, you mongrel, you got no idea what I'm going through. But it was probably the best thing he could have said to me, because it, planted that seed and actually started me to think about the fact that I stuffed up. The choices that I made caused me to get hurt. And then just going back to your question, I think as soon as I came to that understanding that it was my fault, then I was able to sort of, go, okay, get on with it.
Yeah, yeah. There seems a lot today where we but basically don't want to be responsible for our own choices, and no one's held accountable for their own decisions. But no, that's good to hear. For you, Michael, how hard is it for you, Michael, that people can't see that your injuries, that your injuries aren't physical, so they just assume everything's perfect?
Oh, wow. I actually get nervous inside just hearing that question, because it's frustrating. As I went through a rehab program, 2 years worth and of full-on rehab, and then a year after of self-rehabilitation management, and I still do it every day, if you like. So there's a lot of work that's gone into how I am today, and still what I go through every day. So I found it really difficult from day dot, including my family and friends, for people to say, you might go out somewhere and they say, I'll tell you what, you're looking great and it's good to see you back to normal. But my life is just even having this conversation is there's mice in a little turnstile, if you like, and they're running 100 miles an hour trying to keep this brain working. And it's like the old telephone exchange where all the pegs are being put in the right holes to make that connection to the right person. And for me, it's getting words out, choosing the right word. So it gets very frustrating when someone says, even if they do know you've got an acquired brain injury, they say, it's good that you're back to normal again, and they mean well, but really frustrating, because it's hard being me,
Yeah.
But you just, I take a deep breath and just learn to control my emotions.
Yeah. The thing with acquired brain injuries, because I know someone who had one, well, they've still got it, let's be honest. The brain is the slowest part of the body that actually heals. Or it's not like cutting your skin or anything like that. It takes an awful long time. And my experience with the person I know who got an acquired brain injury was, first of all, when you said about trying to get the words out, that's dead on the money. They lost the ability to put simple sentences together, and they'd be struggling to get simple words out. And, helpful male comes in and basically trying to finish sentences. Yeah, not very helpful, apparently. But I used to...
Spot on there. Spot on, Tom, where you said where people come in, step in and try and finish the sentence for you, or try and find the words for you. So in the early days for me, my family, I'd be looking into, I suppose, the distance, like very vague and very non-present, and trying to think of a word. So my family would be saying distribute, discriminate, and it's kind of like, you just need to stop, because it's almost like, the tip of your tongue type of feeling, and you're just trying to, what I've learned now through my specialist is the harder I try and focus on that, the more detrimental it is to myself. So my psychologists now say it's just like a leaf on a river. You're never going to catch all the leaves on the river. Just let it float by and just, okay, don't worry about it. But the mixing of words in sentences as well is very much like a aphasia. It drives my family crazy, but I love it. It's because, I'm dealt this, it doesn't define me, but I've got to have some fun in life, where I'm mixing the whole words in a sentence and the family's going, Dad, stop.
Yeah. Did you also find your memory was significantly affected?
Oh, yeah, and still is today. My memory's shocking. So I've got a lot of strategies now where, so long-term memory is there.
Mm-hmm.
Short-term memory is my pain. So even things like if we were going out tomorrow or today on the weekend, I'll have my wallet, my glasses, my keys, everything's in a space.
Yep.
Now, if my wife Donna picks up something and says, I've put that in the car already for you, I will look at that picture and that picture's wrong. And even though my wife has told me that, I still see that picture's wrong and I can't compute. And what that actually does is for the next whole day, sometimes my whole day is an absolute mess.
Yeah.
Crazy. Remembering things is very difficult. So I'm all about post-it notes, calendars.
I was just going to mention that, Michael. One of the pictures that always makes me laugh is you standing beside a board with about 100 post-it notes on it, and that's just your day mapped out. Is all these different post-it notes?
Yeah, and look, they're my savior, but they don't stop you forgetting that the water's running or the stove's still on and things like that. So there's the safety side of things as well. So a lot of strategies I have in place is really, I'm a very visual person nowadays.
Yep.
So everything's got to be in my face to say, hey, you got to remember this, you got to remember that.
Yeah. One of the things that I found was, well, I don't know, scary in a way, was I'd get phone calls from this friend of mine, and it'd be absolute panic on the other side end of the phone. They couldn't remember how to get home. They couldn't work out how to get from work, the route they've been driving for years and years and years, back to their home. And it'd be like, can you come and help? I don't know where I am. Absolute panic. Is that something similar to what you face?
I don't have that now, but in my work environment, because I went 12 months without a diagnosis, so I thought that I was just going crazy because I was having memory issues and things like that. So I'd be, from a safety perspective, I was getting lost in a live plant. I was supposed to go to one plant and I ended up in the other, and I was thinking, I don't even remember coming this way, and what am I doing here anyway? So I definitely had that in the early days, which is one of the reasons why I had to leave the business after a couple of years and just focus on me and get better.
Yeah.
And rebuild those neuro pathways.
Yeah, exactly. All right, for both of you, a lot of the time when injuries happen, we always think about the individual who suffered the injury, and that's fair enough. But we don't tend to consider how the injury impacts on the person's family. So how did your injuries impact on your people around you?
Yeah, look, I think in a lot of ways, Tom, some of the people around me were impacted more than I was. And I know that might sound strange because, I was the one that was having the medical treatment in hospital and then going through the rehab process and trying to get back on track, trying to rebuild my life. Whereas, my mum and dad and, other people that were close to me, they was just sitting at home worried sick about how I was going to cope being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So, and that's why I think when I do go out and share my story at a site, I spend a fair bit of time not just talking about how I was impacted, but how other people are affected when someone gets hurt. I mean, one of the examples that I use, Tom, is my girlfriend or my partner at the time. She was pretty good. She came to visit me just about every day while I was in hospital. Towards the end of my hospital stay, I was in hospital for 3 months. Towards the end of my hospital stay, she came to visit me one day, and she looked pretty upset when she walked into the room. She came down and sat next to me, and she straight away said, "Look, I need to speak to you about something." And she told me, she said, "Look, I don't think that I'm going to be able to cope if you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life." And the whole point there is the accident affected me, but it affected my girlfriend as well. Some of the things that we used to be able to do together and we talked about doing in the future, I just can't do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of other people impacted when someone gets hurt.
Yeah. Did it mean you had to basically redesign your home around the fact that you were going to be in a wheelchair?
Yeah, well, look, I was pretty lucky because I was only renting a flat. I was living in a flat with a workmate. I couldn't go back to that property. There was about 7 or 8 steps out the front of it. Now, mum and dad, they thought they were doing the right thing. They built, that I was in hospital for 3 months and then full-time rehab for another 6 months. So that 9 months that I was in hospital and rehab, my mum and dad, they built a whole new extension on the back of their house. New bedroom, separate bathroom, nice little ramp for my wheelchair to get in and out. But I'd been away from home for many years. The last thing I wanted to do was go home and live with my parents. So, and again, that's another way that me getting hurt affected mum and dad. I mean, no one paid for that. They had to go out and borrow more money to build that extension on the back of their house. So, I couldn't go back to where I was living and I didn't want to go back and live with mum and dad. I ended up trying to find a place to live by myself. I thought, if I could be as independent as possible, that was probably going to be the best thing for me.
And Michael, how did your injury and your situation affect your family?
Yeah, it was fairly significant because, my work colleagues were affected because it was a reality check about how their lives were panning out, and that could have been me, all the what ifs. So it really affected them. My friends, it affected our friends because I wasn't the same as what I used to be. So we actually lost probably 50% of our friends. And that's not, some people think, oh, that's terrible that people don't stick by you. But I'm sure you'll agree, Woody, that if people are very upfront like your girlfriend was and said, it must have been really hard to do that. If your friends come up to you and they're basically upfront and say, I don't know how to cope with this, you've got to accept that. So it affected our friends, but our friends around us these days are very tight-knit and very supportive. But my family in particular, affected my wife and my kids profoundly because, my wife was my carer for 3 years. My kids saw me out the front of the driveway, so it's a significant event that they've witnessed, and thinking that Dad's not here anymore. So yeah, mentally for my kids, it was very devastating. But I suppose there's a light on the other side of that as well. That's a double-edged sword, where my kids also learnt by my mistakes of, not looking after myself, where they've actually, my upbringing was, hard days work for a hard day's pay, and treat the business that you work for like your own. Whereas my kids now, they don't want your mortgage, don't want all your assets, don't want the pie in the sky stuff. What I want is to live, to enjoy life, and have happiness. So there is a bad side, that it affects people around you, but there's also a good side where it's actually changed a lot of people's lives for the best too.
Yeah.
At the detriment to myself.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask you both a question, and this might make us a little bit uncomfortable, but I don't know. I feel like I should ask it. Do you ever feel a sense of guilt about how your injury has affected those around you?
Yeah, look, I do, Tom. I feel guilty for my dad. My dad died about 7 or 8 years after I got hurt, and I believe he actually felt guilty for me getting hurt. He told me this in hospital once. He said that he felt responsible for what had happened to me. Firstly, because he thought that I got into the industry because of him. I got my job because of him. And secondly, because he felt that he should have done more to try and protect me, try and keep me safe. So, I just wish that, we never really had a conversation before my dad died that, I could sort of reassure him or just try and convince him that it wasn't his fault. It was my fault that caused me to get hurt. But I still think that he probably felt a little bit guilty for what had happened to me. But yeah, I look at some of my, some of the things that have happened since my injury, and I often think to myself, I wonder if that would have happened if I wasn't in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that constant, and here's a simple example for you. I can be going through my day and having a really great day, getting some things done, having a good time. And then all it takes for me is not to be able to reach something, or not to be able to, to get somewhere in my wheelchair. And straight away, my mentality goes back to, oh, shit, if only it hadn't have happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's something that you just, and as Michael will attest, it's something you've just got to live with and deal with for, the rest of your life.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and for me, there was definitely guilt, because I was, I think if you go back to what James's message is always about choices, yeah? And my choice was to work myself to death. It wasn't the business, there wasn't the business like driving you to death. We all have a tongue, One person once said to me, if you bite your tongue long enough, you'll lose your voice. I had a hand to put up to say I'm not coping, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So my choices was the non-action of saying, hey, I'm not coping. And I collapsed out the front of my house, ended up with brain injury, and went through mental health challenges. So that flow-on effect, that ripple effect, not only affected my work colleagues and friends, it significantly affected my family. Excuse me. So I suppose it took away a lot of the time the kids should have been being kids, whereas they had to lift themselves up and become young adults very quickly. And importantly for my wife, who was the person trying to keep this unit together and focus on the person that's injured, my wife was top 100 global inspirational women in mining, working with the same company, had a career pathway all mapped for her. And I took that away from her because I didn't look after myself, because she had to quit her job and became my carer for 3 years. So even those things, you know. So yeah, definitely have guilt about my non-action of looking after myself, and what was thought was to be financially looking after the finances of the family will look after the family, but it's not the way life works, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Speaking of finances, how did your injuries affect you financially?
Oh, hugely. I mean, you know, as you are aware, Tom, mining is a fairly, well rewarded career. So, you're working one minute you're working in mining, you've got the ability to afford, some of the things that you might not be able to afford if you weren't working in the industry. And then all of a sudden that tap gets turned off, and it's just huge impact financially. I mean, look, I was lucky. I was very fortunate. I didn't have a great deal of debt. I owned my car and my motorbikes. I didn't have a mortgage, and I also didn't have a family. I didn't have, the cost of, supporting other people. So I was pretty lucky. But to go from a reasonably comfortable position to all of a sudden just being on either unemployment or compensation benefits, it's just, it's pretty huge difference.
Yeah, for me, financially, for us, financially, it hit really hard. And it's one thing that I share with people. A lot of people won't share the finance side of things, because it's embarrassing. It's, look where I was and look where I am now. But I think for me personally, it's important to share that with you, with people, because at the end of the day, we're all working to earn a dollar and get ahead and set ourselves, our family up, and ourselves up for retirement. Crazy, but that's what we do, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, I was just like Woody, earning good money, and they say golden handcuffs, around mining is, you get trapped in. Yeah, you can get trapped in that cycle, but we didn't have all the toys and that, but we spend our money wisely. We had a family home in Perth. We also had a rental home, but we also had a block of land for our future retirement in a place called Shark Bay overlooking the ocean. So, we didn't own them all, but we were slowly paying it off to reduce tax and all that. But my message to people is, if you don't care about yourself and you only care about money, start caring about yourself, because money runs out. And, when I left the business, workers' comp and insurance only last so long, and then it runs out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've got to share with you, Tom, and the people who are listening this, and it's pretty embarrassing to share this sometimes, but Donna and I, for the first time ever during my rehabilitation, once it finished, we had to walk into Centrelink. Do you guys have Centrelink over East? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Never asked for $1 off the government in my life. So we had to swallow our pride, eat humble pie, and walk in there and say, we're struggling. There's no money coming in anymore. Insurance is finished. We can't live. And they look at your balance sheet, if you like, and say, yeah, you're pretty well off. So you sell everything or buy your family home, and once you're destitute, come back and see us. Yeah. So that was a real, I suppose, wake-up call as well to what things can an incident, a safety incident, or something in your life, a health impact can hurt you, because we had to sell everything. But you know what? We're people that are better off for it these days. We have less, but we're happier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just jump in there too, Tom? One of the things that I picked up on, over the years, since I started sharing my story and visiting workplaces, and Michael mentioned this, is the compo mentality. I've actually sat in a crib room or a workshop and shared my story and just told people, how my life changed because of what happened to me. And then I get people come up to me and say straight to my face, "Oh yeah, Woody, but it's all right if you get hurt at work because you get compo." I hate that. I get angry with the people that believe that if you get hurt while you're doing your job, just by giving you a couple of dollars, it's going to fix things or it's going to make things better. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I can tell you now, I've never met a person who's come out ahead financially because of workers' compensation. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
All right, guys, heading towards the end. All right, you're both well-renowned speakers in safety. If you had to sum up, what was the message you'd like people to walk away from your presentations? What would it be?
Oh, look, I'll go first on this one. Mine's all about choices. I mean, we all get training, job training and safety training. Our workplaces are pretty well up to scratch these days. We've come a long way since I got hurt, 30 years ago. We've got some good systems and procedures in place. But I think some people are still making wrong choices. They're not using the training that they're given. They're not following the systems and procedures. And that's when you're more likely to get hurt. And, I guess the part of the reason that I do what I do, and also Michael will probably back me up on this, is because we know what it's like to have a workplace incident. We know what it's like to go through some of the things that I've been through over the last 30 years and Michael's been through. So, if we can probably stop one person from going through some of the things that we've had to deal with, that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, and my message is about choices as well, but mine's slightly different. It's about really actually being kind to yourself, knowing your limits, and really understanding what your core values are in life. Because if I knew my core values were health, happiness, and family, I wouldn't have driven myself into the ground as far as work, working hours and, stress and things like that. So it's about actually understanding that you're human, be kind to yourself, understand what work-life balance is for yourself. Everyone's different. Speak up when you're not coping and really seek help. Go and speak to a GP, to speak to anyone, to actually, if you're not coping, especially in the mental health space, to actually reach out and get help, because unfortunately we're losing a lot of people to suicide these days.
Yeah. All right. Getting close to wrapping it up. For speaking at workplaces or public speaking in general, are you guys only available in Australia?
No, I've actually done some work overseas, Tom. Some of the Australian-based companies have got operations overseas, and they've asked me to go and speak to their operations in. I've been to the UK, I've been to the States, I've been to Canada, North America. I did New Zealand. We go across the ditch and speak to our brothers and sisters over in NZ. So yeah, no, look, there's really no limits apart from obviously the language barriers. It's all about stories. We've all got stories, and if you can share a story and someone gets a little bit of information out of it, I think it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and
yeah, I'm the same as Woody. Mainly virtual for global.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had the pleasure of being flown in first class, probably like yourself, James.
No. Safety speaking is not a high-paying gig, mate.
Oh, dear. All right, gentlemen, if and I'm sure there will be, if people want to contact you to get them to come and visit their workplace or visit them virtually, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I've got a website. I've got C&B Safe. You can see my banner in the background. Just Google C&B Safe, or actually Woody. If you Google Woody, I've got a fairly high social media profile. I tend to whinge and complain about things that are not James, not James friendly. I do a lot of travelling and Tom, I think you've seen some of my little videos where someone will offer a room, like a wheelchair-friendly room, and when I get there, there's either a step out the front or there's a glass shower case around the shower, and I'm going, hang on, that's not a wheelchair-friendly room.
Yeah.
So I do tend to post some of these things on social media and have a bit of a laugh about it.
Yep.
But yeah, Woody, type in Woody or Seen Be Safe, and same with Michael. Type in. Actually, Michael works with Michael and I work together sometimes, so you can get to either of us through. If you get onto Michael and you want to get onto me, or vice versa.
Good. All right, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on this morning, and thank you very much for giving up your time for me and the listeners. I'm sure they've learned something. I know I have. But for now, it's time to go. But I do look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you very much again, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Health and Safety Conversations with Tom Bourne. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.